For 70 years, Walter set an extra plate at his dinner table, pouring a glass of wine for someone who never came. His family thought it was just a habit, a quiet tribute to the past, but no one knew the heartbreaking truth behind that empty chair. One night, his granddaughter finally asked him why, and the story he revealed left her in tears. It was a tale of love, loss, and a promise that had never been broken. A vanished fiancé, a lifetime of unanswered questions, and a discovery that would change everything. What happened all those years ago? And why had Walter never let go? The answer was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. An elderly man named Walter sat at the head of his modest wooden dining table, as he had done every evening for the past 70 years. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the chandelier reflecting off the antique plates and silverware. His hands, weathered by time, moved with careful precision as he set the table for two. One plate in front of him. One plate in front of the empty chair across from him. He reached for the wine bottle and poured a single glass, not for himself. It sat untouched beside the empty chair. For 7 decades, Walter had performed this ritual without fail. Through holidays, birthdays, and even the lonely winters when no one came to visit, he set that place. His children and grandchildren had often asked about the chair, but he had never spoken a word about it. They assumed it was his way of honoring the past, though none knew the story behind it. It wasn't until his granddaughter, Emma, stayed with him one autumn that the truth slowly began to reveal itself. One evening, as Walter prepared the table, Emma watched silently from the kitchen doorway. She had always wondered about the mysterious chair, but had never dared to ask directly. But tonight, something in her grandfather's solemn expression compelled her to finally speak. "Grandpa," she said softly, stepping forward, "why do you always set a place for someone who never comes?" Walter froze for a moment, his hand gripping the back of the empty chair, his shoulders tensed as if bracing against a storm. Then, with a sigh, he motioned for Emma to sit beside him. It was time. He reached into the pocket of his sweater and pulled out a small, worn-out photograph. The edges were curled, the colors faded, but the image was clear, a beautiful young woman, no older than 20, smiling with warmth that seemed to radiate through the picture. Her name was Margaret, Walter said, his voice laced with emotion. She was the love of my life. Emma took the photograph gently, studying the woman's kind eyes and soft curls. "What happened to her?" she asked, hesitantly. Walter exhaled slowly, as if breathing out a lifetime of sorrow. "We were engaged," he said, his voice distant. "The happiest time of my life. We had plans, marriage, a house, a family. But then the war came." His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his glass, though he didn't drink. "I was drafted before we could wed. I promised her I'd return, that we'd have the life we dreamed of." He swallowed hard. "And she promised she'd wait for me." Emma leaned forward, listening intently as her grandfather's memories unfolded like pages in an old book. "She wrote to me every week," Walter continued. "Letters filled with love, hope, dreams of the future." But then suddenly, the letters stopped. 1 month passed, then 2, then a year. His voice broke slightly, and he gripped the table. "When I finally came home, I ran straight to her house. I was ready to get on one knee, to tell her I'd love her forever. But she wasn't there." Emma's heart ached at the pain in his eyes. Walter's voice trembled as he stared at the empty chair, his eyes lost in memories from long ago. "Her parents told me she had disappeared," he whispered, "that she had left town one night and never returned. No one knew where she had gone or why." His granddaughter Emily leaned forward, gripping his hand. "You never tried to find her?" she asked gently. Walter sighed, his aged fingers tracing the rim of the untouched wine glass in front of him. "Of course, I did. I searched everywhere. I knocked on every door, called every friend we had, wrote letters to places I thought she might have gone. But there was nothing. No trace, no word, as if she had vanished into thin air. Emily swallowed hard, her heart breaking for the grandfather who had held onto this pain for so many years. "What did you do then?" Walter's lips curled into a sad smile. I waited. I waited for her to come back, for an explanation, for something, anything. And when I realized she might never return, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let her memory fade. I would always leave a seat for her at the table, just in case she ever found her way back home. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she glanced around the cozy dining room, suddenly understanding the weight behind the simple tradition that had seemed so odd to the rest of the family. They had always assumed it was just an old man's habit, nothing more. But now she realized it was a love story frozen in time. "Grandpa," she whispered, "did you ever find out what happened to her?" Walter took a deep breath, his eyes shining with emotion. "Not for a long time," he admitted. "For decades, I had nothing but unanswered questions. But then one day, I did." Emily's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Walter pulled out an old weathered envelope from his pocket, his hands shaking slightly as he placed it on the table. "I received this letter a few months ago," he said. "From her." Emily gasped, her fingers flying to her lips. "She's alive?" Walter nodded. "She was alive all along. She never ran away. She never abandoned me. She was taken." Emily's breath hitched. Taken? By who? Walter clenched his jaw, the pain of the past still fresh. "Her parents," he whispered. "They forced her to leave, told her I wasn't good enough, that she deserved a better life. They sent her to another city, cut off all contact, and made her believe I would never come for her." Emily shook her head in disbelief. That's cruel. That's horrible." Walter's eyes were glossy with unshed tears. "She wanted to come back," he continued. "She wrote to me, but her letters were never sent. She spent her whole life wondering if I had moved on, if I had forgotten her. And all these years, I was doing the same." Emily reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. "What did she say in the letter?" Walter's voice cracked. "She told me she never stopped loving me, that she never married, that she had been waiting too, just like I had." A single tear slipped down his cheek as he looked at Emily. "And now, she wants to see me again." Emily's heart ached at the weight of those words. "Are you going to meet her?" Walter smiled, a mixture of sadness and hope in his eyes. "I have to. I spent 70 years waiting for her. I won't waste another day." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Did you ever find her?" Walter shook his head slowly. "I searched for years. I wrote letters. I asked everyone who might have known something. But Margaret was